Hey everyone, so previously we covered the tooltip settings. In this video, we're going to go through the series customization. Now, one thing to remember is that the combo chart allows you to combine 25 different series. And the flexibility of having individual customization for every single one of them allows you to create more than 100 different variations from a single visual. Now, as always, you have your two views for the combo and combo bar visual, where you can go also through chart types, stack and cluster combinations, and also see what does the no data policy do. But for now, what we're going to do is go to the training view, and we're going to actually start building the visuals from scratch and go through those settings. So as always, first things first, we're going to add an instance of the combo visual. We're going to resize it, and we're going to disable the background and the title. Going back to the setup, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to create a two-layer combination. We're going to go for department as our first layer. We're going to add region as our second layer. Now, for the series, what we're going to do here is we're going to add payout. We're going to add budget. And for the third series, we're going to do something a little bit more different. We're going to add name and change it to be a count of name. So we have three different series. The count of name doesn't really tell us a lot, so I'm going to name it number of employees. So there we go. Now we have our three series. Let's go into the customization. So first things first, since I know the setup right now and I can see even that number of employees is going to be only in the hundreds, I'm going to open up formatting options and also enable secondary y-axis. Now going through the settings, what I want to do first is go to series 3, since that is my number of employees. For this one, I'm going to go for align. And I'm also going to scroll down a bit more and I'm going to assign it to the secondary y-axis so we can actually see that line. There we go. Now, to make it more prominent, we can actually quickly also change the color of it. We're going to increase the thickness of it so it's just more visible. And we're going to also add some markers so we can see the exact points where the values are going to be represented. There you go. Now, for the two other series, I'm going to do something a little bit different. We're going to leave the payout as is, so that's just going to be a regular column. Now, for series 2, which is the budget, we can actually transition this one to be an area. And for the area, we're also going to use additional capabilities. So if we go down here, you can see that one of the capabilities that the visual has is stepped outline. Once we enable it, we can see that it essentially works as an outline for the column. In order for it to be decently visible and still noticeable, we can also adjust the fill color opacity. We're going to make it semi-transparent. We're going to make it like 20%. Now, something you can also, if you remember the previous videos, you can play around with the display order. So I can either bring it more backwards or bring it in front. Depending on how you want to see the visual, this is just something to keep in mind. But essentially, if we go into the series configuration, the main things that you do need to remember are that you have the option of changing the name of the series within the configuration tab. Now, the added benefit of this is that instead of changing the name right here, you can just do it through the formatting options because it's easier afterwards to manipulate with it. Now, next thing is the chart type. So as you can see, every single series that you added to the visual can be either a column, line, or an area. So this is the power of the combo visual. Like I said in the beginning, you have 25 different series. You have 3 different chart types. These combinations plus the stacking and clustering, which we already have covered, allows you to create these hundreds of different variations from a single visual. The only thing that essentially limits you in these cases is just imagination, because you have to think about how to set up the data to achieve the wanted result. All right, so we covered the type. Next one is value labels. So that's going to be in the next chapter. Just know that in order to enable them, you need to go into the series configuration and enable this toggle right here. Now, for each of the series and chart types also, you do have additional customization options. So for example, if you're using just a line, you can see that the settings that I have are outline colors, opacity, width, outline type, and some other settings that are specific to the outline. So for example, a stepped line or an outline smoothing to essentially have the smoothed out effect. Or if you want to have a jagged line, you can easily disable the outline smoothing. Now you have your markers, marker sizes, stacks and clusters is something that we have covered already previously. Value axis, we also covered in one of the previous videos. Display order, as always, allows you to define whether the series is in front or in the back, Or if you are using stacks, it allows you to define where is that specific series going to be placed within the stack. Now, something that I mentioned in the very beginning as well is these visuals also have the option of working with situations where you have no data. For this situation, I'm actually going to go back to the Combo Visual tab, and I'm going to open up No Data Policy. So what we have within the visual is we essentially have three modes that we support. So if we go into the formatting option, I'm just going to quickly show you where to find it. Scroll down right here, you can see there's a setting called No Data Policy. So the three options that we have here are join, zero, or a skip. The difference between them is that, for example, right here, the first one is join. What it does is it synthetically extends the line to the next point that you have available. For example, you can see that March doesn't have a data point, so I'm just physically extending the line. The same happens also for July and November right here. The second option is skip. What it does is it physically removes any chart visualizations from that particular category or segment, and it recontinues the next drawing when you have one or two series. Now, with lines, something to remember is that if you only have a singular point between two gaps, there isn't going to be a line because there's not enough points to be connected in between. And the third option that we have is zero. Zero means that you're physically forcing the chart to be drawn through the zero line. In this case, you can see I'm using a combination of stepped outlines plus the zero policy. So this really quickly allows me to see where I have actual values and where the value goes back down to zero. Now, going back into for example, the chart types, right? So like I mentioned, you have these three chart types that you can work with: lines, areas, columns, and any combinations between them. Now, for the stacks and clusters, as I mentioned also before, we have gone through these. So you have the ability to stack, cluster, and have all these customization options in a single visual. In this case, what we're doing is you can see that we have two columns being stacked on top of another, and then we're using a third, which is just a single line, which is on a separate stack. But because of the values, it sort of looks like that's the outline of the current situation. So these are some of the options. Now, going back into the formatting options, let's just quickly choose a visual, formatting options, and series configuration. Let's go for series 1. Like I said also, for every single chart type, you have additional settings. In this case, I'm looking at a column. So instead of just having the outline customization, which we had previously for the number of employees, in this case, we also have fill color opacities, and few other settings. These just allow you to be as flexible as possible. Now, something that I wanted to also briefly cover are going to be the toggles here at the bottom. So we have three toggles that allow you to work with the series on initial load and its visual display within the chart. So in this case, like for example, we have this green outline. So we're going to go to series 2 to actually configure it. Scroll down a bit more, and right here, like I said, you have this show in legends. So for example, when I disable it, you can see that I still have that line visible within the chart. Within the tooltip, I still have information regarding it, but I don't have a reference within the legend. So it's just something to keep in mind. Alternatively, what you can also do is, for example, disable the information from the tooltip. This is really useful for those cases where essentially you want to create a reference line, like for example, a target or something like that. So you can have an actual series within the chart, but don't have any reference to it, neither in the tooltip or the legends. Now, the third option is if I turn these back on, and a third setting right here is called enabled by default. So this is a new setting that we added to the visual. Essentially, what it allows you to do is to define whether or not this particular series is going to be loaded on when the chart initially loads on. So for example, if I disable it, you can see that I don't have that green line anymore. And if I just, for example, switch between two pages so that the chart refreshes, you can see that the green line hasn't appeared. But if you look at the legends, the budget or the green line is actually grayed out. And if I click on it, I can enable this. So this is also a really good way on how you can work with multiple metrics. So you can disable some of them on the initial load and only enable them when it's necessary. Now, the last but not least is the legend marker. So what happens here by default is, like I mentioned also in the legends block, is we're taking a snapshot of the series. But if you want to override it, you can go into the series specific settings and define a particular marker for that series. All right, that's going to be it for the series configuration, and I'll see you in the next chapter.